You cannot just loiter on a corner in a private community. Sitting in a car at the edge of a driveway is not allowed. Lingering and idling are prohibited. You must remain unseen. Not in a place like this, where locals recognize every resident's car and spot any stranger immediately. Because of that, I want to pose a different inquiry. How can someone monitor an 84-year-old lady, her residence, her entrance, and her daily habits for 3 weeks without a single neighbor reporting a concern? How can a person hang around that area long enough to figure out which cameras to dodge, what brush to use for cover, and which 25-minute gap to hit without ever being seen on film? That kind of intel doesn't come from a stranger just passing through. You do it from a nearby residence. The Catalina foothills section of Tucson is not an area where an outsider can easily blend into the crowd. We are talking about one-story ranch houses on massive desert plots, tucked behind low stone walls and native plants on quiet dead-end streets. The homes surrounding Nancy Guthrie's place aren't crammed together at all. Residents are familiar with every vehicle on the street. They know who fits in. In enclaves like this, security tech is found in many places besides the front door. Lenses are fixed on entryways, paths, and garages, or even hidden in trees facing the street. If you idle at the curb for 20 minutes here, at least one person will notice. Still, whatever occurred with Nancy Guthrie required a person to have deep, specific tactical knowledge of her exact home, her security setup, her timeline, and her habits. Kurt Dabb, a retired homicide investigator from Pima County, informed Parade magazine that the sheer scale of what happened to Nancy Guthrie suggests it was too much for one individual. Based on the available facts, he suspects this operation required a team of 2 to 4 individuals working together across various roles. A small group focusing on a single victim in a quiet suburb. They clearly had enough local knowledge to operate from within. That level of planning is no accident. And it takes more than 3 hours. A person put in the work here. They analyzed the local flow, the security holes, and the daily trends well before February 1st arrived. Federal agents have realized this desde the start. Currently, their presence in the area indicates they are revisiting a question they have had all along. Where was the suspect hiding when away from Nancy's porch? The base of operations theory. Bob Creer put in almost 30 years with Pima County law enforcement. He led SWAT teams, a role that forces you to get inside a fugitive's head, to anticipate their moves, and grasp how a mission is planned from the ground up. When Parade magazine sat him down for an exclusive talk about why the FBI is sniffing around a vacant house near Nancy's place, Krieger didn't hold back. He noted that agents might view a property like that, an empty house that recently went quiet, as a potential staging ground or hideout for the person or people involved. A perfect front. Think about the implications for a second, because it really matters. An empty residence offers more than just a roof. It grants you a sense of belonging. In a spot like Catalina foothills, where a new face or a parked car draws stares instantly, a house provides something way more useful than just a hiding spot. It gives you a reason to be there. You aren't some creeper. You're a new resident. You're a prospective buyer touring the place. You're just moving in. You look like you belong. Creeder mentioned to the press that such a hidden spot could function as a hub for electronic monitoring tools. These devices could be tucked away in a shed or inside the house without raising eyebrows. Let that sink in for a moment. I'm not talking about someone peering through binoculars at a window or leaning out a car door, but actual high-tech gear like cameras set up to record the whole block, likely on a timer, to map out Nancy's daily routine over weeks. Here is the scenario Creeder described. A person living in that empty house could wander the streets at any time, day or night, without looking suspicious. If you seem like a local, your presence is justified. You can simply greet a neighbor walking their pet. You acknowledge the gardeners, park in the drive, and just observe. You track the community's movements and specifically Nancy's schedule. The Fed's interest in that empty house was hardly a surprise. Brian Enton from News Nation, who has been stationed in this area since the beginning, verified via insiders that agents went back to the foothills during the middle of March, re-interviewing the residents, focusing specifically on a former neighbor who left the area prior to Nancy's vanishing. Not long after, but just before the 1st of February, Anton shared some fresh details he uncovered today. Sources have verified that federal investigators revisited Nancy Guthrie's street recently. They have been canvassing the area and gathering more statements. One particular lead involves a resident who moved away just before Nancy's disappearance. The detectives are now looking much more closely into that specific event. While it might be unrelated, it is a point of interest that the feds are currently pursuing. Federal agents have returned to Nancy Guthrie's street, focusing on a neighbor who moved out just before she went missing, and they're digging deep into that. The reporter is being very careful with his phrasing here, and we should listen to what he is leaving out. The Bureau doesn't circle back to a neighborhood 6 weeks into a case to grill a former resident unless that person's schedule fits perfectly into the timeline they are mapping out. You do not investigate a move unless the timing aligns with known facts. That person is gone. An individual departed right before February 1st. Investigators want answers regarding that empty house and the extra surveillance. On top of that empty house, investigators have been building a whole other lead that wasn't public until Anton's report dropped this week. The FBI has combed through a nearby construction site several times. Near the intersection of Camino Escalante and Camino Miral, agents questioned the crew at a work site, searched storage areas, and scouted the grounds. Construction zones are tactically significant. They have constant, valid activity from builders and drivers, creating a predictable flow of people that anyone could easily study. That location offers clear lines of sight along with gear and half-built walls for cover. Plus, it allows access to neighboring yards that would usually be locked up. Investigators found more digital photos from Nancy's own security system, going past the well-known doorbell clips. According to ABC News, security feeds covering the pool and the sides of Nancy's house caught small preview images of unknown people in the days leading up to her kidnapping. Just tiny thumbnails. No actual video from those feeds was saved. However, ex-agent Brad Garrett told the news crew that those early snapshots are incredibly significant. He explained that police could potentially identify visitors at Nancy's residence. They are trying to piece together the identities of the unknown figures in those pictures. Who were those individuals at Nancy's house before February 1st? The feds are compiling a roster, using the names from the nearby construction crew to find a match. January 11th and January 24th were both Saturdays. Public data reveals far more about the weeks leading up to February 1st than most reporters have noticed. Police asked every neighbor to go through their security clips from the whole month of January. That is standard. But then their requests got way more focused. They specifically told residents to check the night of January 11th. Nancy's family reinforced this in a public message they gave to KVOA in Tucson. They have pleaded with locals to rack their brains about what happened around January 31st and early February 1st, as well as the night of January 11th. On Saturday, January 11th, Nancy's neighbor Laura, who has been talking to Brian Anton since the start, told him that cops went through her security tapes from 2 specific nights, January 11th and 24th. Anton highlighted a detail that hasn't received enough focus. Both dates were Saturdays, exactly 3 weeks apart, and occurred 3 weeks before the woman was taken. Both those dates fall on the same day of the week. That isn't just a fluke, it is a clear pattern. Later, Fox News Digital mentioned that a source close to the case confirmed those doorbell photos weren't all from one night. One picture was snapped on a different day, meaning that masked person showed up at Nancy's front porch at least twice before February 1st. The Pima County Sheriff's Office contested this, claiming no timestamps exist to prove the dates were different, yet they still asked the public for info specifically about January 11th. Not the whole month or a broad window, but that specific night. You don't make such a targeted request unless you think something happened on January 11th. Detectives also found motion-activated photos from other cameras on the property near the pool and backyard from the days before February 1st. These aren't from the kidnapping night. These show people on her land before she was snatched. That is the surveillance reality. 3 confirmed sightings, January 11th, January 24th, and February 1st, each one getting closer. Each visit was a chance to learn. Each trip confirmed details for the next one. At the 30-minute mark, the ransom note is revealed. Then there is the ransom letter, or specifically, what it said. When news of the demand first hit the media, TMZ's Harvey Levin pointed out something very specific. The note, he mentioned, had details that went way beyond just asking for a payout. Down at the end of the alert were notes on Nancy's outfit the night she vanished, the damage to her home, and where her Apple Watch was found. Anchor Mary Coleman, who saw the first ransom letter, put it this way. She was asked at what moment they realized this wasn't just a prank, but something incredibly serious. She confirmed that it became clear to everyone very quickly. Well, you know, the note had a specific cash amount, a cutoff time, and other details that only the kidnapper would be aware of. That definitely sparked some major concerns. It listed a specific price, a deadline, and other facts only the abductor could know, she mentioned. I think many people were doubting if the whole thing was even real. While they are still checking if it is legit, they are taking every lead into consideration. We do have a few details we can mention regarding what was actually in that letter. Much of the shared information is something only the person holding her for ransom would actually know. This is the kind of detail that only a captor truly possesses. Harvey Levin talked about a detail in that letter that grabbed his attention, the mention of an Apple Watch and a broken light, which the FBI later confirmed. What grabbed my attention was the Apple Watch. There are photos of her wearing it with Savannah, but they pointed out exactly where it was left in the house, which wasn't public knowledge. The letter stated exactly where the Apple Watch was, and it was not in a spot you would typically expect to find it. That particular fact was exactly what caught the Fed's eye. Her outfit that evening, that smart watch, a motion light, and how the house looked were all meant to verify the claim, matching perfectly with a person holding deep inside info on Nancy Guthrie's home and her whereabouts when she went missing. This is the part that leads back to the same mystery. How does anyone know what an 8 and 4-year-old woman is wearing inside her own home on a Friday night? How do they know where she set her watch down? Not just in a random spot, but somewhere specific enough for the FBI to notice. You only know those things if you have been around, if you have had a way inside. The connection between the kidnapper and Nancy's world goes deeper than what you can see from the street. A staging spot provides proximity, not just cover. You have been close enough for long enough to learn the layout, the lens, the bushes, the glass. Let's look at what the guy did at Nancy's door on February 1st, because every move shows what he already knew. The Bureau put out doorbell video of a person in a ski mask, pants, a coat, and gloves carrying an Ozark trail pack as they walked up to the front entrance. The individual tries to block the lens with a gloved hand first, then backs off, looks around, and grabs a branch from the lawn to hold over the camera. Josh Campbell, a former agent now with CNN, was blunt. He said trying to hide the camera with stuff found in the yard makes you wonder about the person's skill level and planning. Here is the catch. Someone who actually cased the place and knew exactly where the cameras were would have shown up with the right tools. They would have tape, a rag, or paint. Steve Moore was even more direct. He stated he is 100% certain that whoever was at that door knew Nancy was right inside while they were messing with the camera. They weren't guessing. They knew she was home. Now look at the timing. The doorbell camera cut out at 1:47 in the morning on February 1st. 25 minutes later, a side camera tripped, but the device didn't record. The event happened, but the video is missing. That is a 25-minute gap between a camera dying and a motion event that left no trace. Right at that moment, several neighbors found their security footage was marked as unavailable. A web outage in the neighborhood during Nancy's disappearance was reported by the Today Show and checked by the police. Detectives eventually checked a broken utility box located just around the corner from Nancy's house. The Pima County Sheriff later told Newsweek that the utility box wasn't linked to the case. That lead went nowhere. But the cameras failing and that 25-minute blackout are still on the record. Here is what we have. The suspect showed up right when the main camera went down. Whether that was planned or just a lucky break is something the police haven't cleared up yet. But the familiarity this person had with the camera's location, the plants on the ground, and the timing suggests this wasn't their first time at the house. Steve Moore calls it a targeted attack. When Brian Anton returned to the neighborhood and shared that the FBI was asking for the names of every contractor at a nearby renovation site, Steve Moore was there to comment. Moore helped reframe what these federal actions actually signify. The initial reaction, like the one from the neighbor who messaged Anton, was one of pure annoyance. That neighbor thought the FBI was starting from scratch by asking for worker names. Moore disagreed. He told Anton that agents checking backgrounds 6 weeks in means they aren't lost at all. It implies they have a working theory about how the kidnapping went down, and now they are checking that theory against the people who were actually there. Here is the deal, Moore put it plainly. The core theory dictates every single move the detectives make. From day one, the working assumption has been that this wasn't some random act. We are talking about a deliberate strike, not a fluke or a crime of opportunity that just happened. Since the jump, the investigators have operated under the belief that the person who grabbed Nancy Guthrie arrived at that residence fully aware she was home, specifically targeting her for a reason. Sheriff Nanos even confirmed this to the press, stating they likely understand the motive and the targeted nature of the attack. If she was singled out, the perpetrator must have had some prior link or a way to track her movements. Moore laid it out like this. The police are not treating the local laborers as the primary suspects here. They are treating the crew as a pool of people who had a legal reason to be in the area before February 1st. These are people who might have crossed paths with Nancy at the curb or the mailbox. Moore provided some vital background on Nancy's lifestyle. How often was she actually out and about? She did own a vehicle, for sure. Also, she didn't attend the local church in person. Instead, she streamed the services online from a church in New York that Savannah was a member of. This suggests she was a bit of a homebody. That makes the case trickier because her social circle was fairly limited. She just wasn't out in public very often. She never showed up to the neighborhood church. She just caught the New York live streams with Savannah's group. People nearby mentioned she used to walk with them years back, but health issues put a stop to that. Consequently, the list of individuals who might have actually interacted with her, watched her routines, or learned about her house is a pretty tight circle. Federal agents are now combing through that short list very carefully, and those construction crews are definitely on it. Federal agents are currently canvassing Nancy Guthrie's block, focusing their investigation on a former resident who relocated just before February 1st. They have also been seen scouring the nearby construction project, conducting one-on-one interviews with every single laborer on the site by name. They are circling back to residents who were already questioned, hoping some fresh detail or memory might have surfaced since then. Authorities are painstakingly retracing every single movement, driven by an initial hunch that has remained steadfast since the start. This crime was clearly intentional, meaning the solution hinges on a hidden link between the perpetrator and this exact community, these particular houses, and these very streets. Bob Crigier's concept of a staging point isn't just some random guess. It is the expert opinion of a veteran who spent 30 years managing ops that used this logic. An empty house nearby offers the perfect hiding spot and a plausible excuse. It lets someone slip through the area at all hours without raising the eyebrows of the locals. Beyond that, it offers an advantage that is tough to measure. Precious time. Time to observe, time to study, time to see exactly what someone wears while lounging at midnight, time to spot where their Apple Watch is kept, time to figure out which bush hides the security camera. You don't get that kind of intel from a quick drive-by. That comes from repeated visits over several weeks throughout January. This case leaves behind more than fear. It leaves behind a warning that every family, every neighborhood, and every community should take seriously. Evil does not always arrive looking violent, loud, or obvious. Sometimes it studies quietly. Sometimes it watches patiently. Sometimes it hides in the spaces people stop paying attention to. That is why the true lesson here is not only about crime. It is about awareness, compassion, and responsibility. We live in a time when many people assume safety is guaranteed by cameras, gates, alarms, and quiet streets. But real safety also depends on human attention. It depends on neighbors who notice when something feels wrong, communities that do not ignore unusual behavior, and families who protect the vulnerable with urgency, not routine. An elderly woman living a quiet life should never become easy prey simply because she is predictable, isolated, or trusting. Her story reminds us that the most vulnerable among us need more than sympathy after tragedy. They need protection before danger ever reaches the door. If this story teaches us anything, it is this: never underestimate small signs, never dismiss strange patterns, and never assume someone else will act. Awareness can interrupt danger. Care can save a life. And sometimes, simply paying attention is the most powerful form of love and protection we can offer.